the president and the crown prince.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. President.
A diplomatic crisis roiling since the October murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But a new CIA assessment finds that Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the killing, according to reporting by the Washington Post and confirmed by NBC News. This morning, the president was cautious.
The CIA is going to be speaking to me today. We have not been briefed yet. As of this moment, we were told that he did not play a role.
And clearly conflicted, given the personal and strategic relationship.
We're taking a look at it. You know, we also have a great ally in Saudi Arabia. They give us a lot of jobs.
Among the evidence, the Post reports the CIA intercepted a phone call from the Crown Prince's brother Khaled, who is the Saudi ambassador to the U.S., telling Khashoggi to go to the consulate in Turkey to retrieve documents, assuring his safety. The ambassador denied making such a call on Twitter and certainly never suggested he go to Turkey for any reason. Today, during a 5-hour flight to California, the president spoke by phone to CIA Director Gina Haspel and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Later, the State Department disputed that any determinations have been made. Recent reports indicating that the U.S. government has made a final conclusion are inaccurate. But Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Bob Corker, anticipating another move by the Crown Prince, warned the Trump administration to act quickly, tweeting, "Before MBS executes the men who apparently carried out his orders." This week, the U.S. sanctioned 17 Saudi individuals linked to the killing. The vice president, traveling in Asia, declined to talk about the CIA's classified findings, but told reporters the U.S. will follow the facts and insisted that the U.S. will hold responsible any individuals who are accountable for Khashoggi's murder.
In Cairo, President Nasser's top aide, Wing Commander Ali Sabri, explains Egypt's challenge to the West by its seizure of the Suez Canal, but pays no heed to protests as his country drafts plans for a general mobilization. A threatening gesture that sees French, British, and U.S. forces in the Mediterranean spring to activity, as here at Toulon, the great French naval base, where a fleet has gotten ready to steam Suezward. While in England, naval reservists converge on Plymouth to man 3 aircraft carriers that Britain is dispatching to the troubled waterway. A precautionary measure in the event of Egypt's refusal to attend the 24-nation meeting called to internationalize the seized canal. Regiments of paratroopers, too, are on the move, as here at Portsmouth. For each of the 3 British flat tops sailing to the Mediterranean will be loaded with these most modern of fighting units, as the West, challenged again, faces the facts.
In September 1962, Egyptian troops invaded the Yemen. They went in to support a military coup against the ruling imam. The invasion terrified the West because President Nasser of Egypt was backed by the Soviet Union, and he now threatened the oil fields of Saudi Arabia.
We have our troops there. We minimize the number of our troops. It depends about the attitude of Saudi Arabia, because if we leave Yemen without agreement, they will try to return the imam back to Yemen. We'll stay there until we reach agreement with Saudi Arabia.
How long do you think this is going to be?
I don't know. We are ready to stay there for 10 years.
For the British, Nasser threatened far more than just oil. The Yemen overlooked the British base at Aden. It guarded British trading routes throughout the world, and right-wingers in the government feared that if the Egyptians, backed by the Soviets, attacked, they would paralyse Britain's economy. Their leader was Julian Amery.
The prosperity of our people rests really on oil of the Persian Gulf, the rubber and tin of Malaya, and the gold, copper, and precious metals of South and Central Africa. As long as we have access to these, as long as we can realize the investments we have there, as long as we can trade with this part of the world, we shall be prosperous. If the communists were to take them over, we would lose the lot. Governments like Colonel Nasser's in Egypt are just as dangerous.
David Stirling was a close friend of Julian Amery's, and together they were determined to find a way to stop Nasser. But Nasser had humiliated Britain once before at Suez, and they knew the British government would do nothing officially to stop him. They had neither the will nor the money. Stirling and Amery had dinner with the Foreign Secretary, Alec Douglas Hume, at White's Club in St James's. They proposed a plan. A group of ex-SAS men would mount an operation to fight the Egyptians, but they would do it privately.
In this particular time, we're talking about in the 60s, the British governments had lost the will, in some ways, to engage in this sort of operation. There was a great need for stability. There was change taking place all around. Revolutions, coups, and we could do something which the British government no longer had the will to do, helping to get rid of a foreign power in the Yemen. So it was logical for private enterprise to pick up this particular challenge. And particularly as we felt it was very important for British national interests.
The British government agreed to the idea. Stirling would help to organise a private war in the Yemen, but they wouldn't have to pay for it, and no one would ever know they were involved. But Stirling's team now had to find the money for both men and weapons. In secret, a member of the team flew to Saudi Arabia. Stirling already knew Prince Faisal, the most powerful of the king's sons. Faisal was terrified that Nasser would invade his country next, and agreed to the British idea. The Saudis would pay for the war.
Saudis saw David as a sort of their idea of a buccaneering Britain, an unusual who talked to them as if he was almost an Arab. Well, he didn't speak a word, except for sort of localized Arabic. I don't think he knew any sort of pidgin Arabic. But he talked to them as they understood him and respected him.
The Saudis' use of Stirling was nothing but an expression of need. They needed his services. They didn't have anybody with his expertise. They didn't have anybody of his stature and ability. That is very, very simple. In his case, I think to say that he was a mercenary is to sell him short. He was a mercenary, and simultaneously he was an extension of British policy. He wasn't doing anything illegal. This government knew about it and approved it. And therefore he was sort of a merger between a mercenary and a Lawrence of Arabia, if you wish. You know, he brought these two things together, the romantic adventurer and the modern day mercenary came together in the person of Stirling.
The Saudis agreed to pay for the British mercenaries and also to smuggle weapons into the Yemen. The man in charge of the weapons would be a young trader, Adnan Khashoggi. Khashoggi found the weapons that Stirling's team needed from Britain and America. Hundreds of rifles and machine guns left over from the Second World War.
They were not the type of arms they could get from their usual sources. They needed specialist arms of mountain warfare, guerrilla warfare, and things like that. That, of course, signaled the emergence of Khashoggi as an arms dealer. His first arms deal, Adnan Khashoggi, his first arms deal had to do with the war in Yemen.
In this world-exclusive edition of Lifestyles, we'll explore the fabulous private domains of Adnan Khashoggi, whose globe-trotting existence is so unbelievably lush, it has inspired blockbuster movies and novels which only pale in comparison to the true story you will see in the next 60 minutes.
Your host on this exclusive edition of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous is celebrity interviewer Robin Leach. In the untold story of the richest man on earth, we'll fly his $50 million glamour palace in the sky, sail his $70 million yacht that's so exclusive, even James Bond had to ask permission to come aboard. Get the best seat at his multi-million-dollar birthday party that awed European royalty. Join Brooke Shields at a backyard barbecue billionaire style, smack in the middle of his own slice of African jungle. Then meet the man himself.
Money doesn't become the driving force that makes you live. You make money, use it the way you want.
And now to our host, Robin Leach.
I know you've been reading, seeing, and hearing a lot of stories the past several days attributed to Danish sailors, unnamed observers at Italian ports and Spanish harbors, and especially unnamed government officials of my administration. Well, now you're going to hear the facts from a White House source, and you know my name. I wanted this time to talk with you about an extremely sensitive and profoundly important matter of foreign policy. For 18 months now, we have had underway a secret diplomatic initiative to Iran. That initiative was undertaken for the simplest and best of reasons: to renew a relationship with the nation of Iran, to bring an honorable end to the bloody 6-year war between Iran and Iraq, to eliminate state-sponsored terrorism and subversion, and to effect the safe return of all hostages. Without Iran's cooperation, we cannot bring an end to the Persian Gulf War. Without Iran's concurrence, there can be no enduring peace in the Middle East. For 10 days now, the American and world press have been full of reports and rumors about this initiative and these objectives. Now, my fellow Americans, there's an old saying that nothing spreads so quickly as a rumor. So I thought it was time to speak with you directly, to tell you firsthand about our dealings with Iran. As Will Rogers once said, rumor travels faster, but it don't stay put as long as truth. So let's get to the facts.
The U.S. government's initial reaction was very swift.
We were going to give it everything we had, one last push.
A huge covert action program to help drive the Soviets out.
While future enemies lurk nearby, these undercover shadow warriors will take on a communist superpower on one of history's harshest battlefields.
We have an opportunity to really punish the Soviets. They have made a rare mistake, and a mistake of large proportions.
Go win this thing.
Did he ever express to you his desire to bring down the West, to kill Americans, Westerners, non-believers, infidels, however he phrased it? Did you get that sense from him?
No. At that time, in Afghanistan, his aim was to establish a just Islamic state in Afghanistan, which will be a model, a success story for other countries to follow. And the same thing he had envisioned for Syria in 1982. Actually, that was the drive of the mainstream Islamic movement of the 1980s or 70s, is to succeed in achieving that Islamic state. But of course, they have failed to do so, and they are succeeding nowadays into creating the diverse democratic state, which Islam will play a role, but not be the only decisive role there.
Since 9/11, al-Qaeda has morphed into franchises, and the deadliest is in Yemen. The NewsHour has reported often from that country, most recently when Special Correspondent Jane Ferguson crossed the dangerous front line from land controlled by a Sunni coalition led by Saudi Arabia to an area held by Shia Houthi rebels by smuggling herself in. And now there is a new story from the Associated Press about that front line, that Saudi Arabia, a U.S. ally, is supporting al-Qaeda fighters in Yemen. Jane joins me now from Beirut. Jane Ferguson, thank you very much. The U.S., of course, is supporting Saudi, its ally, and supporting the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. But Saudi is cutting deals, apparently, with al-Qaeda. I mean, does this mean, ironically, that the U.S. And al-Qaeda are on the same side?
To a certain extent, Nick, it does, although I'm sure neither side would like to acknowledge that inconvenient fact that they're basically essentially fighting on the same side.